classical conditioning, more than just drooling when a bell rings. Hi, it's Pam from Ben McFuzzylegs again, and it's time for another daily dog training tip. March Madness, one dog training tip a day for the whole of March. So if you're interested in this, please subscribe below and give us a like. Also, I do Thursday needle felting tips and Monday Eatsy Seller tips. So, classical conditioning, what on earth am I talking about here? Well, you actually maybe probably covered this at school with the Pavlovs dog experiment. This is where it all came from. And it's actually quite fascinating how this can be applied to dog training. So the experiment, if you're not aware of it, just involved Pavlov studied and seen that obviously when he presented the dog with food, the dog started drooling, and so he decided that this was an unconditioned response, something that just happens naturally. When the dog sees food, he drools, and from a biological point of view that totally makes sense. He starts to produce saliva to start digesting his food. So that's an unconditioned response, something that just happens automatically when something else happens. These two things are paired. And then what Pavlov did was he started, before presenting the food, he would ring a bell and then brought the food in. So over time the dog started to associate the bell ringing with the food, and so actually what happened was they were able to just ring the bell and the dog started drooling. So then the ringing the bell became a predictor that the dog was going to start drooling. So they were able to add this bell ringing and get the same response from the dog. So how this can work in dog behaviour is it's a really powerful tool for modifying behaviour. First of all, it's used all the time in clicker training. That's the full point of clicker training. We condition the dog, we teach them that the click means the click always happens before food. So this is used a lot. This is the main feature of clicker training, really. So basically what happens is the dog gets used to the fact that with the click then something good happens. So this means that once he's learnt this is the case, then you can be much more precise in the delivery of your rewards, or the timing of your rewards, because the dog starts to associate the click with getting a treat. So actually the click in itself becomes rewarding because it's always followed up by the treat, or if your dog's not food motivated, by a ball or by whatever good thing you want to pair it up with. So this means, like I said, you can be a lot more precise about your rewarding. It gives you much better timing for these kind of things. So if you imagine you're teaching your dog a trick, let's say you're teaching your dog to sit, and you get your dog to sit and they've done really well, so then you reach into your pocket or whatever to take a treat out, and in that very second when you're taking the treat out, the dog might have lain down, they might have stood up, they might have looked to the squirrel in the distance, but they don't necessarily assume that they're getting the treat at that moment because of something they did a few seconds beforehand. But what can happen with the clicker is the second your dog bum hits the ground, or even before depending on what level you're training it, but if we say the second the dog's bum hits the ground you click, the dog knows that the reward is coming, but what happens is there's no delay. He immediately knows that this is the exact thing that's caused the click to happen. The best way to think of it as it captures the moment like a camera. If you take a picture of that very moment, you're saying, there, that's the very thing that I wanted you to do. So the dog actually learns much more quickly because it's much more precise. I mean, in the daftest of examples, a while ago, a friend of mine, she was trying to teach her dog not to bark at the postman when they were in the garden, and one of the days we were all sitting out in the garden and the postman came past and her dog didn't bark. So she said to herself, oh, that dog's, my dog's been so clever, I better reward him. And she actually got up, went into the house, went to the treat bag, got a treat, came out and rewarded the dog. In the time when she was away, the dog had tipped over a dish of water and dug a little hole in the garden, and she came down and gave the dog a treat. So that was kind of really terrible timing. But you always have to remember the order of the behaviours with a clicker. If you click and then a treat doesn't happen, you can also sort of uncondition it. You can take it back to meaning nothing, because the clicker itself doesn't mean anything until you condition it, until you classically condition it to mean the treat's on the way. So if you just click and then don't reward, then it will go back to being just another noise in the dog's life. So you've got to make sure the behaviour happens, you capture, you click for the behaviour at that very right moment, and then you reinforce. It does just mean that you don't have to be right there on top of your dog. Like if you're doing agility and they nail that contact, you can click without being stood next to them. It's a powerful tool, but you have to use it right. Thank you for joining me. I hope that was of some interest, some actual behaviour work that was done on dogs and is very relatable to training nowadays. I'll go into some more depth on other things that this kind of classical conditioning can do in tomorrow's video. If you come back then, thank you very much.